She collapsed, clutching her newborn. No one helped until a mysterious millionaire lifted her into. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's incredible story. As Emma staggered through the crowded streets, the weight of her newborn pressing against her chest, she felt like she could barely take another step. It had been a long, exhausting night at the hospital, and now, on top of everything else, she was facing the harsh reality of motherhood alone. She had no family nearby, no support system, and certainly no way of getting home without risking her life. Her hands trembled as she clutched her baby tighter, her vision blurring with fatigue. Despite the busy morning crowd, it felt like no one was paying attention to her. People rushed by without a second glance, lost in their own worlds. The cold air hit her face, sending a shiver down her spine, but it wasn't enough to shake off the panic rising inside her. As the world spun around her, Emma's knees buckled, and she collapsed onto the pavement. Her body shook as she gasped for breath, clutching her newborn desperately. But still, no one stopped. She could hear footsteps rushing past, the voices of busy strangers blending into the distant hum of city noise. Please, she thought, just someone help me. But no one did. A few moments later, a tall figure appeared through the crowd. He wasn't a doctor, nor was he a bystander. He was a man, tall, handsome, and well-dressed. But there was something about his presence that commanded attention. As he saw Emma on the ground, his eyes softened. He didn't hesitate. He approached her quickly, kneeling down beside her. "Are you okay?" His voice was calm, almost too calm for someone witnessing such a desperate situation. Emma tried to speak but could only manage a faint nod, her chest tight with exhaustion and fear. Without another word, the man gently scooped her into his arms, lifting her effortlessly as if she weighed nothing at all. For a moment, she forgot her own discomfort, lost in the warmth of his embrace. He carried her towards a nearby bench, his movements smooth and purposeful. "I'll get you help," he promised, his voice steady. Emma barely had the energy to process what was happening. She felt the soft breeze of the city against her skin. But her mind was clouded, and her body ached from the ordeal. She didn't know who this man was, and at that moment, she didn't care. All she could think about was the comfort of being in his arms, the first hint of safety she had felt all morning. The man didn't stop there. He took out his phone and called someone, his voice low but confident as he spoke, arranging for immediate assistance. "You're not alone anymore," he reassured her. But just as quickly as he appeared, he seemed to fade into the background of her foggy mind. Emma didn't even catch his name before her eyes fluttered closed, succumbing to the exhaustion that had been building up for hours. When she awoke, the world around her was quieter. The bright city lights no longer seemed so harsh, and there was a soft hum of a machine nearby. She blinked and tried to adjust her vision, but it wasn't the noisy street she had been in. It was a soft, comfortable room. The weight of her baby was still in her arms, and as her eyes focused, she saw the man again. He was standing by the window, staring out over the city skyline. She blinked, wondering if she was dreaming. But no, he was real. And now, she would have to face the truth about who he really was. Who was this mysterious man? Why had he helped her? And what would his actions mean for her and her newborn? These questions circled in her mind as she tried to make sense of everything. Emma's life was about to change forever, but she had no idea just how much her world was about to shift. As Emma lay there in the comfortable bed, her mind was racing. She had just woken up from a deep sleep, the first real rest she'd had in what felt like forever. The soft hum of the machines around her was strangely comforting, and she could still feel the warmth of the man who had helped her earlier. But now, she was more confused than ever. Who was he? Why had he come to her rescue? She looked around the room, taking in the plush surroundings. The walls were painted a calming shade of blue, and the light from the window gently filtered in, casting a soft glow across the room. It felt nothing like the cold, impersonal streets she had collapsed on earlier. A nurse entered the room, and Emma immediately sat up, startled. The nurse smiled kindly at her, noticing her reaction. "You're awake," the nurse said, her tone soft and reassuring. "How are you feeling?" Emma hesitated for a moment before responding, still trying to process everything. I'm okay. Where am I?" The nurse's smile never wavered. "You're in a private medical suite. You've been resting for a few hours. The man who helped you earlier is right outside, and he's been very concerned about you." Emma's heart skipped a beat. The man. She remembered his eyes, his steady hands, and the way he had lifted her with such ease. But who was he? "Can I see him?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The nurse nodded. "Of course. I'll let him know you're awake." As the nurse stepped out, Emma's mind raced with questions. Who was this man, and why had he helped her? He didn't know her, and yet he had taken care of her like someone who truly cared. Emma could barely believe it. In her world, people didn't help unless they had something to gain. She hadn't seen true kindness in so long, not since her mother had passed away. She looked down at her baby, still peacefully asleep in her arms, oblivious to the whirlwind of emotions Emma was going through. Her baby was the only thing that truly mattered to her. But now, everything seemed to be shifting. The man had appeared out of nowhere, like some kind of guardian angel. Was it all too good to be true? Just then, the door to her room opened, and the man walked in. Emma's breath caught in her throat. He was even more striking, up close tall, with sharp features and a presence that seemed to fill the entire room. But it wasn't just his appearance that caught her attention. It was the look in his eyes. There was kindness there, yes, but also something else. Something Emma couldn't quite place. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his voice low and sincere. Emma nodded, trying to steady herself. "Better, thank you." She looked at him, studying him for a moment before speaking again. I don't understand. Why did you help me?" He took a step closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "Because you needed help," he said simply. Emma shook her head, still confused. "But why me? Why didn't you just keep walking?" He paused for a moment, as if contemplating how much to reveal. "Sometimes, life puts us in situations where we can't ignore what's right in front of us," he said. "When I saw you, something told me I couldn't just walk away." Emma felt a lump form in her throat. She had never heard anyone speak like that before. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. He smiled, a soft, reassuring smile. "You don't have to say anything. Just know that you and your baby are safe now." Emma felt her eyes well up with tears, but she fought them back. She couldn't afford to break down, not now. She had to be strong for her baby. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You've already done so much." The man reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a business card, handing it to her. "If you ever need anything," he said, "anything at all, don't hesitate to call me. I mean it." Emma took the card, but she still didn't understand. There was something more to this. She could feel it, but she couldn't put her finger on it yet. "Who are you?" she finally asked, her voice filled with curiosity and a touch of disbelief. He paused, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then, with a small sigh, he spoke. "My name is Daniel Carter. I run a few companies here in the city." Emma blinked, trying to process what he had just said. "Daniel Carter," she repeated slowly. You're the CEO of Carter Enterprises, aren't you?" He nodded, his gaze never leaving her. "Yes, I am. But that doesn't matter right now." Emma felt her heart race. She had heard of Carter Enterprises, everyone had. It was one of the biggest and most successful companies in the city. And this man, this stranger who had saved her life, was its CEO. She couldn't believe it. "Why would someone like you help someone like me?" she asked, her voice trembling. Daniel smiled again, though this time there was a hint of sadness in his eyes. "Because sometimes the people who need help the most are the ones who don't ask for it," he said softly. Emma didn't know what to say to that. She had no idea what her future held, but one thing was clear: her life had just changed in ways she couldn't have imagined. The next few days passed in a blur for Emma. The events that had unfolded seemed almost too surreal to comprehend. She kept replaying the moment Daniel had introduced himself as Daniel Carter, the CEO of Carter Enterprises, in her mind. She had never imagined that someone like him would even notice someone like her, much less offer help in the way he had. As the days went by, Emma found herself at a crossroads. On one hand, she wanted to put the whole encounter behind her and go back to her life. But on the other hand, the kindness Daniel had shown her kept gnawing at her. What was his motive? Why would a successful businessman like him take the time to help a stranger like her? Every time she looked at her baby, she knew that she had to keep pushing forward for her child's sake. She couldn't afford to lose focus, not now. But then, a call came that would change everything. It was from Daniel's assistant, asking if Emma could come to his office to discuss something important. Emma's heart skipped a beat. She had been trying to avoid him, unsure of how to process everything. But now she couldn't avoid it any longer. With a mix of nervousness and curiosity, Emma agreed. She had to know what this was about. Arriving at Carter Enterprises, Emma was escorted to a sleek, modern office on the top floor of the building. As the elevator doors opened, she was struck by the panoramic view of the city. The building was nothing like her small apartment, and the contrast made her feel small in comparison. But she was determined to keep her composure. The assistant led her down a long hallway into an expansive office, where Daniel stood, looking even more formidable than she had remembered. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, his posture confident, and yet there was something about his demeanor that softened when he saw her. "Emma," he said, his voice warm but businesslike. "Thank you for coming." Emma nodded, trying to steady herself. She hadn't expected to feel so nervous. "Of course," she replied. "I'm not sure what this is about, but I appreciate you taking the time to meet with me." Daniel gestured for her to sit, and once she did, he sat across from her. There was a brief moment of silence, and then Daniel spoke, his voice calm and steady. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened the other day. You've been through so much, and I know that you're trying to get back on your feet. I want to help you more than just offering you a place to stay or a job. I want to offer you something that will give you a real chance at a fresh start." Emma's heart raced. What was he talking about? This sounded like more than just a simple offer of assistance. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Daniel leaned forward, his gaze fixed on hers. "I'm offering you the opportunity to work with my foundation, Emma. The Carter Foundation. It's a charity I started to help people like you, people who are struggling but who have the drive to turn things around. I want you to join the team, help us make a real difference. And in exchange, I can offer you stability, a future, and the kind of security you've never had before." Emma sat in stunned silence, trying to process his words. This was more than she had ever imagined possible. She had been struggling just to survive, and now here was this man, offering her a lifeline, a chance to change her life completely. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Daniel smiled gently. "You don't have to say anything right now. Take your time to think about it. I know this is a big decision, but I truly believe this could be the opportunity you need." As he spoke, Emma felt something shift inside her. It wasn't just the offer of a job or money. It was the chance to prove to herself that she could rise above her circumstances. It was the chance to give her baby a better life, a life where they wouldn't have to struggle every day. But even as hope began to swell in her chest, there was a part of her that hesitated. She didn't know Daniel well enough to trust him fully, and she didn't want to rely on anyone, especially not someone like him. She had learned the hard way that people couldn't always be trusted. "I appreciate the offer," she said slowly. "But I need some time to think about it. I don't want to make any decisions I might regret." Daniel nodded, his expression understanding. "Of course. Take all the time you need. Just know that the door is open, and we'll be here if you decide to take that step." As Emma left Carter Enterprises, her mind was racing. She had no idea what to do. The offer was tempting, but it felt too good to be true. What did Daniel really want from her? Was he offering her a second chance? Or was there something more to this than she understood? And yet, as she looked down at her baby, she knew that she had to take this opportunity seriously. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she had a choice. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. Oh, days passed, and Emma found herself at a crossroads. She kept replaying Daniel's offer in her mind, torn between the opportunity he had extended and the fear of trusting someone who could easily change her life in ways she wasn't sure she could handle. She had always been independent, relying on herself to get by, never asking for help. But here she was, facing the possibility of a fresh start, something she hadn't dared to hope for in years. The decision weighed heavily on her shoulders. The comfort and stability Daniel promised seemed too good to pass up, but a part of her hesitated, afraid of becoming dependent on someone who was so far removed from her world. Every day, she woke up with the same thoughts. Could she trust him? Was this all real? Or was it just a way for him to gain something from her? She didn't want to be another person taken advantage of. But as the days went by, Emma realized that the weight of her indecision was beginning to take a toll. She was no closer to making up her mind, and the tension in her chest only grew. It wasn't just about her anymore, it was about her baby. Every choice she made would impact their future. She couldn't keep living in limbo. One afternoon, she decided she needed to stop running from the decision. She sat in her small apartment, the baby asleep in her arms, and stared at the business card Daniel had given her. She had held on to it for days, but it felt like a lifeline she couldn't quite grab. But today, something in her shifted. She couldn't let fear dictate her choices anymore. She reached for the phone and dialed the number on the card. The phone rang once, twice, and then a calm voice answered. "Hello, this is Daniel Carter." Emma's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected to hear his voice, and yet there he was, on the other end of the line. "Mr. Carter," she began, her voice steady but uncertain. "I've thought about your offer, and I think I'm ready to take the next step. I'd like to join the Carter Foundation." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and for a moment, Emma wondered if she had made a mistake. But then Daniel's voice broke through the silence. "I'm glad to hear that, Emma," he said, his tone warm and reassuring. "You've made the right choice. I'll have my assistant send you the details, and we can get started as soon as you're ready." Emma felt a sense of relief wash over her. She had made the decision, and now it was time to move forward. The next few days were a whirlwind of meetings, paperwork, and new beginnings. Emma found herself in a world she had never imagined she would be a part of, a world where the problems she had once thought were insurmountable now seemed within reach. Daniel's team at the Carter Foundation was supportive, welcoming, and determined to help her succeed. The work was challenging, but it felt fulfilling. For the first time in a long time, Emma felt like she had a purpose, a direction. But as she settled into her new role, she began to notice something else. Every time she was around Daniel, there was a palpable tension in the air. She couldn't quite place it, but it was there, an unspoken connection that neither of them acknowledged. He was always polite, professional, but there was a warmth in his eyes whenever he looked at her, a subtle softness that made Emma's heart race. She had always prided herself on being able to keep her emotions in check, but this was different. She couldn't deny that she was beginning to develop feelings for him, feelings that she wasn't sure she could control. And what troubled her even more was the fact that Daniel seemed to be feeling the same way. She caught him looking at her when he thought she wasn't paying attention, his gaze lingering a little longer than necessary. At first, Emma tried to ignore it. She told herself it was just her imagination, that she was reading too much into things. But deep down, she knew the truth. She was falling for him. And that scared her. She had never been in a situation like this before, and the thought of being vulnerable again, of opening her heart to someone, felt overwhelming. She had spent so many years building walls around herself to protect her from hurt. But now, with Daniel, those walls seemed to be crumbling. One evening, as they worked late together in the office, the tension between them finally broke. Emma was sorting through some files when she felt Daniel's presence beside her. She looked up to find him standing there, his gaze locked on hers. For a moment, neither of them spoke, and the world seemed to stand still. Then, Daniel spoke softly. "Emma," he began, his voice low, "I need to tell you something. I know this may complicate things, but I can't keep pretending that everything is just professional between us." Emma's heart raced. She wasn't sure where this was going, but she could feel the weight of his words. "Daniel," she said, her voice trembling, I don't know what to say." He reached out and gently took her hand, his touch sending a jolt of electricity through her. "You don't have to say anything," he whispered. "I just want you to know that I care about you, Emma, more than I should." The words hung in the air, and for the first time, Emma felt a wave of warmth spread through her chest. This was real. Everything she had been afraid to admit was true. But just as she was about to respond, the moment was interrupted by the sound of her baby's cry coming from her phone, which was still on the desk. Emma quickly pulled away, a feeling of panic rising in her. She had left her baby with a sitter, and the last thing she wanted was for something to go wrong. "I have to go," she said, her voice a little shaky as she grabbed her phone. Daniel watched her, his expression unreadable, but he nodded in understanding. "Go," he said softly. "We'll talk later." As Emma left the office, she couldn't shake the feeling that everything was changing. Her life was no longer the same, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for everything that was coming. But deep down, she knew that she had to take a chance. And for the first time in a long time, she was ready to embrace the uncertainty of it all. Emma's heart raced as she hurried home that night. Her mind was still spinning from the conversation with Daniel, and she couldn't shake the intensity of the moment. She had never expected things to take such a turn. The confession, his gentle touch, and the way his eyes had locked with hers, it was all too much. As she walked into her small apartment, she was greeted by the sound of her baby's soft cries from the crib. Emma's heart melted instantly as she went to pick up her child. But even in that moment of motherhood, her mind kept drifting back to Daniel. What did his confession mean? Was he really serious? Was she ready for what was unfolding between them? Emma had spent so many years protecting herself, keeping her emotions buried deep inside, and now it felt as though they were spilling over. She had always believed that love was a luxury she couldn't afford. But now, in Daniel's presence, everything seemed different. She couldn't help but wonder if she had been wrong all along, wrong about love, wrong about trusting people, and wrong about the walls she had built around her heart. That night, as she lay in bed, Emma tried to push the thoughts of Daniel aside, but they lingered in her mind, filling the quiet spaces with questions. The next morning, she awoke to a text message from Daniel. It simply read, "I'm thinking of you, Emma. Hope you're doing well." Her heart skipped a beat as she stared at the message. It was simple, but it carried so much weight. She had only known him for a short time, yet he had already made such an impact on her life. She couldn't deny that she was starting to feel something for him, something that made her both excited and scared. She quickly responded, her fingers trembling as she typed, "I'm doing well, thank you. Hope you're having a good day too." After sending the message, Emma tried to focus on her day, but it was impossible to ignore the thoughts of Daniel. As she went about her tasks at the Carter Foundation, she found herself thinking of him constantly. The way he had looked at her, the way he had spoken to her with such care, it was all so different from what she was used to. She had always been independent, but now she felt a deep yearning for something more. By the end of the day, Daniel called her again. This time, his voice sounded warmer, more personal. "I wanted to check in with you," he said. "How's everything going with the foundation?" Emma smiled softly. "It's going really well. I feel like I'm starting to make a real difference." There was a brief silence before Daniel spoke again, his voice gentle. "I'm glad to hear that. I knew you had it in you." Emma's heart fluttered at his words, but she quickly reminded herself to stay focused. "Thank you," she replied, trying to keep the conversation professional. "I'm learning a lot." "I know it's a lot to take in," Daniel said, his tone turning more serious. "But I believe in you, Emma, and I want to help you every step of the way." Emma felt a wave of gratitude wash over her, but also a pang of confusion. She wasn't used to this kind of support. And part of her still wondered what Daniel's true intentions were. But there was another part of her, a part she couldn't ignore, that wanted to believe him, that wanted to trust him. "Thank you, Daniel," she said quietly. "I appreciate everything you've done for me." Daniel paused before speaking again. "Emma," he said, his voice softer now, "there's something I need to tell you." Emma's pulse quickened. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know we've only known each other for a short time," he began, "but I've been thinking about you a lot, and I want you to know that I'm here for you, not just as your employer, but as someone who cares about you. I care about you, Emma." Emma felt her breath catch in her throat. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. She had known, deep down, that something was growing between them, but hearing him say it out loud made everything feel so real. She didn't know how to respond at first. Part of her wanted to leap into his arms and tell him she felt the same, but the other part of her was terrified of what that would mean. She had been burned before, and the thought of opening up her heart again felt overwhelming. I don't know what to say," Emma replied, her voice trembling. "I'm not sure I'm ready for this." Daniel's voice softened, filled with understanding. "I know. And I'm not asking you to make any decisions right now. I just want you to know how I feel. Whenever you're ready, I'll be here." Emma felt a mixture of relief and confusion. She hadn't expected him to be so patient, so kind. And yet, she still wasn't sure what the future held for them. She wasn't sure if she was ready to trust him with her heart. As they ended the call, Emma sat in silence for a moment, staring at the phone in her hand. Her mind was spinning. She had never imagined that her life could take such a dramatic turn, but now she had to face the reality of it. She was standing at the edge of something new, something terrifying, but also exciting. And for the first time in a long time, Emma allowed herself to feel hope. As the days passed, Emma couldn't shake the emotions swirling inside her. The kindness Daniel had shown her, the way he made her feel seen, was something she had never experienced before. She had spent so many years alone, trying to protect herself from the world, but Daniel's words, his gestures, made her wonder if she had been wrong to close herself off for so long. Her life had been nothing but survival, getting by, taking care of her baby, doing whatever it took to make ends meet. But now, for the first time, she was thinking about a future that wasn't just about getting by. She was thinking about possibilities, about a life where she could have more than just the basics. But as much as she was drawn to Daniel, as much as she wanted to believe in what he was offering, she still felt unsure. She had never been in a relationship like this before, never allowed herself to be vulnerable with someone. And even though Daniel had been nothing but kind, part of her feared what might happen if she allowed herself to trust him fully. One evening, Emma sat alone in her apartment after putting her baby to bed. The quiet of the night was both comforting and unsettling. She stared out the window at the city lights, feeling a sense of restlessness she couldn't quite shake. Her phone buzzed on the table, interrupting her thoughts. She glanced at it, and her heart skipped a beat when she saw it was a message from Daniel. It read, "I hope you're doing well, Emma. I've been thinking about you a lot. Let me know if you need anything." Emma stared at the message for a moment, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She wanted to respond, wanted to tell him how much his support had meant to her, how much she was starting to care for him, but she was scared. She didn't want to make the same mistakes she had made in the past, opening herself up to someone only to be hurt again. But as she sat there, the fear began to fade, replaced by a sense of clarity. She realized that if she didn't take this chance, if she didn't take a step forward, she might never know what could have been. She had to trust herself, and she had to trust him. She quickly typed a response. "I'm doing okay. Thank you for reaching out. I've been thinking about everything you said." A few moments later, she received a reply. "I'm glad to hear that. I'm always here if you need to talk. You don't have to do this alone." The words warmed Emma's heart, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like she wasn't carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. She wasn't alone anymore. The next day, Emma arrived at work, feeling more determined than ever. She was ready to embrace the opportunity Daniel had given her, ready to put her fears aside and step into a new chapter of her life. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she also knew it was the right thing to do. As she walked through the doors of the Carter Foundation, she felt a sense of belonging she had never felt before. The people here were kind, supportive, and genuinely invested in helping each other succeed. It was a far cry from the isolation she had known for so long. Daniel greeted her with a warm smile when she arrived. "You look like you're ready to take on the world," he said, his voice light with encouragement. Emma smiled back, feeling a little lighter than she had in weeks. "I think I'm ready," she replied. Daniel's expression softened. "I knew you would be. You've got everything it takes." As the day went on, Emma threw herself into her work, immersing herself in the projects she had been assigned. For the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of purpose beyond just survival. She was making a difference, and slowly, She began to believe that maybe, just maybe, her life could be something more than she had ever dreamed. But even as she began to thrive in her new role, she couldn't ignore the tension that lingered between her and Daniel. It was always there, subtle but undeniable. Every time their eyes met, there was an unspoken connection, a pull that neither of them acknowledged. Emma couldn't help but wonder if he felt the same way, but she wasn't sure she was ready to act on it. For now, she focused on her work, on building a future for herself and her baby. She wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was clear: she wasn't alone anymore. And for the first time in a long time, she felt a glimmer of hope. That night, as she lay in bed, Emma couldn't help but smile to herself. She had taken a step forward, and even though she wasn't sure where it would lead, she felt more alive than she had in years. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, she was excited to see where it would take her. Weeks passed, and Emma began to settle into her new role at the Carter Foundation. The initial nerves had faded, replaced by a growing sense of fulfillment. She was finally doing something meaningful, something that not only gave her purpose but also brought her closer to a community of people who genuinely cared. As each day passed, she felt more confident in her abilities, and more importantly, she started to believe in herself again. The fear and doubt that had clouded her thoughts in the past began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of pride in the work she was doing. But even with all the progress she had made, there was one thing she couldn't ignore: the growing tension between her and Daniel. It was becoming harder to deny that there was something more between them. Every time their paths crossed, whether at work or outside of it, the connection between them was palpable. His smile, his gentle touch, the way he looked at her, it all spoke volumes. And while Emma tried to keep things professional, it was becoming increasingly difficult to do so. She had never been one to act on impulse, especially when it came to matters of the heart. Her past had taught her to keep her guard up, to protect herself from disappointment and heartache. But with Daniel, it felt different. She had never been so drawn to someone in such a way. One evening, after another long day at work, Emma was heading to her car when she felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to see Daniel standing there, his expression serious but soft. "Emma," he said quietly, "I've been wanting to talk to you about something." Emma's heart raced as she looked at him. She had been trying to avoid these conversations, unsure of how to handle them. But deep down, she knew this moment was inevitable. "What is it?" she asked, her voice steady but her nerves betraying her. Daniel took a deep breath, his gaze locking with hers. "I can't keep pretending that there's nothing between us," he said, his voice low but filled with sincerity. "I care about you, Emma, more than I've allowed myself to admit." Emma's breath caught in her throat. The words she had been afraid to hear were finally out in the open, and she wasn't sure how to respond. Her heart was pounding in her chest, but she didn't know if she was ready for this, ready to open herself up to someone like this. "Daniel," she began, her voice trembling, "I don't know if I can do this. I've never been good at trusting people, and I'm afraid of what this might mean. I don't want to get hurt again." Daniel stepped closer, his expression gentle, yet filled with determination. "I understand your fear, Emma. I do. But I'm not asking for you to jump into anything right away. I just want you to know how I feel. And I want you to know that I'm here for you, for whatever you need." The sincerity in his voice made Emma's heart ache. She had never had anyone speak to her this way, and it was both comforting and terrifying at the same time. She took a step back, her mind racing. "I need time," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need time to figure out what I want. This is all so new to me." Daniel nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Take all the time you need," he said softly. "I'm not going anywhere, Emma. I just wanted you to know the truth." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Emma standing there, her heart full of conflicting emotions. As she got into her car and drove home, her mind was a whirlwind. She couldn't stop thinking about Daniel's words, the way he had looked at her, the way he had been so open and vulnerable. She had always been afraid of letting someone in, but with him, it felt different. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she wasn't alone. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew she had to take this journey one step at a time. The next few days were filled with uncertainty. Emma couldn't stop thinking about Daniel, but she also knew she had to focus on herself and her baby. She wasn't ready to jump into something she wasn't sure about. But at the same time, she couldn't ignore the feelings she was developing for him. One night, as she lay in bed, her thoughts consumed by everything that had happened, she finally made a decision. She had to be honest with herself. She had to stop running from her feelings and face what was in front of her. The next day, she texted Daniel. It was simple, but direct. "I'm ready to talk. When can we meet?" A few minutes later, he replied, "I'll make time whenever you're ready. I'm looking forward to it." Emma smiled, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. She didn't know what the future held, but she was ready to take the next step. The next chapter of her life was just beginning. And for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was finally on the right path. As she closed her eyes that night, Emma allowed herself to believe in the possibility of a future she had once thought was out of reach. It was time to take a chance, and for the first time in a long time, she was ready to embrace it. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions for Emma as she awaited the meeting with Daniel. She had spent so much time running from her feelings, unsure of what was real and what was just her fear talking. But now she had decided to face it. She couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him anymore. She had come to realize that she was more than capable of taking control of her life, but Daniel's presence in it made her feel something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The day they were supposed to meet, Emma couldn't concentrate on anything. At work, her mind kept drifting back to Daniel, his words echoing in her head. "I care about you, Emma." It had been so simple, but so profound, and it kept her thinking about the future, about possibilities she never thought she'd have. As the clock ticked down toward the meeting, Emma felt a nervous excitement building inside her. She had told herself that she was ready for this conversation, but now that the moment was here, she wasn't so sure. She glanced at herself in the mirror as she prepared to leave. She had spent so long hiding behind the walls she had built, but now, for the first time in years, she allowed herself to wonder if it was time to take those walls down. As she arrived at the cafe where they agreed to meet, Emma felt a sense of calm mixed with anticipation. She was already sitting at a table by the time Daniel walked in. He was dressed in a casual yet stylish outfit, and his presence immediately filled the room. When their eyes met, she felt her heart flutter. "Emma," he said softly, his voice full of warmth. "I'm glad you decided to meet me." Emma nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I'm glad too. I think I've been avoiding this for a while, but I can't keep running from it." Daniel took a seat across from her, his gaze never leaving hers. "I know it's not easy," he said, his voice steady but filled with understanding. "But I want you to know that I'm here for you, no matter what. I don't want to rush you into anything, but I also don't want you to feel like you're alone in this." Emma felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She had never had someone offer her so much without expecting anything in return. She had always been the one to give, but here was someone offering her something. She had never allowed herself to accept support, care, and, most importantly, trust. She looked at Daniel, trying to find the right words. "I've been so scared," she confessed, her voice trembling slightly. "I've been alone for so long, and I don't know how to trust someone again. I don't know if I can let my guard down." Daniel reached across the table, his hand gently covering hers. "You don't have to do anything you're not ready for," he said softly. "I'm not asking for anything from you, Emma. I just want to be there for you, as a friend, as someone who cares about you." Emma felt a tear slip down her cheek, and she quickly wiped it away. "I don't know what to do with all of this," she admitted. "It's so new to me, all of it, but I can't deny that I feel something for you, something I can't ignore." Daniel's expression softened, and he squeezed her hand reassuringly. "You don't have to have all the answers right now," he said gently. "I'm not asking you to decide anything today. I just wanted to be honest with you, because you deserve that. You deserve to know how I feel." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of his words settling between them. Emma knew that what Daniel was offering her was real, that he wasn't just saying things to win her over. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could take a chance on him. "I don't know what's going to happen," Emma said finally, her voice steadying. "But I'm willing to see where this goes, Daniel. I think I'm ready to trust you." Daniel's eyes lit up with a mix of relief and something deeper, something that made Emma's heart skip a beat. "Thank you," he said quietly. I promise you, I won't let you down." As they finished their coffee, the atmosphere between them had shifted. The tension that had hung in the air was gone, replaced by something warm and real. They both knew that they were at the beginning of something new, something uncertain, but filled with the potential for something beautiful. For Emma, it was the first step toward letting go of her fears and allowing herself to embrace love again. She had spent so many years fighting against it, afraid of what might happen if she allowed herself to be vulnerable. But now, with Daniel, she felt a glimmer of hope that maybe she could have the kind of love she had always dreamed of. As they parted ways that evening, Emma felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. The future was still uncertain, but she knew one thing for sure: she wasn't facing it alone anymore. And for the first time in years, Emma allowed herself to believe that everything was going to be okay. Weeks passed since that conversation at the cafe, and Emma's life had taken a turn she never thought possible. She had allowed herself to trust Daniel, and in doing so, she had opened up her heart to a future filled with possibilities she hadn't dared to dream of. The relationship between them grew deeper each day, not just with romantic feelings, but with a bond built on mutual respect and understanding. She was no longer the woman who felt alone in the world, and she knew Daniel was no longer the distant CEO she had once thought him to be. Every day, they learned more about each other, sharing stories, laughter, and quiet moments. Emma had become not only a valued member of the Carter Foundation, but also a woman with a sense of purpose, a woman who had rediscovered hope in love and in herself. Daniel had kept his promise. He had never pushed her, never rushed her, and always supported her in ways that made her feel seen. And as the weeks passed, Emma realized just how much she had changed. The woman she had been guarded, uncertain, and fearful was giving way to someone more open, more trusting. It wasn't perfect, of course. There were still moments of doubt, and the past sometimes threatened to rise up and cloud her judgment. But Daniel was always there to remind her that she was worthy of love, worthy of happiness. One evening, after a long day at work, Emma sat in her apartment, her baby peacefully asleep in the next room. Her phone buzzed, and she picked it up to see a message from Daniel. "Meet me at the park. I have something to show you." Her heart skipped a beat. She had no idea what it could be, but she felt a familiar flutter of excitement in her chest. She had learned by now that Daniel had a way of turning even the smallest moments into something meaningful. As she walked to the park, she couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed in her life. She was no longer the woman who worried about how to make it through the day. She had found a purpose, a future, and most surprisingly, she had found love. When she arrived at the park, Daniel was standing by the fountain, a soft smile on his face. He looked at her, his eyes filled with warmth, and for a moment, everything around them seemed to fade away. "I've been thinking about this for a while," he said, his voice calm but filled with emotion. "Emma, I know we've been taking things slow, but I can't imagine my life without you. You've brought so much light into my world, and I want to spend the rest of my life showing you how much you mean to me." Emma's heart swelled as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. The world seemed to stop as he opened it, revealing a beautiful ring. It was simple, elegant, and everything she had ever imagined. "Will you marry me, Emma?" Daniel asked, his voice barely above a whisper. For a moment, Emma was speechless. Her heart raced, and she felt like the world was spinning around her. She had never expected this, never thought she would be standing here, in this moment, with him, feeling so sure of the love they shared. But in that instant, she knew. She knew that her fears, her doubts, and her past no longer had a hold on her. She was ready to step into the future with Daniel, ready to embrace the love they had found together. "Yes," she said, her voice full of emotion. "Yes, I will marry you." Daniel's face lit up with a smile so full of joy that Emma felt her heart overflow with happiness. He took her hand, and in that moment, she realized just how far they had come. From the first day they met, to the challenges they had faced, to the quiet moments of connection they had shared, this was the beginning of something beautiful. They were no longer two people walking through life alone. They were a team, partners in love and in life. As Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger, Emma knew that this was only the beginning of their story. They still had a lifetime ahead of them, filled with moments of joy, love, and growth. And for the first time in years, Emma felt like she had found her home. The love she had always longed for, The kind of love that was built on trust, kindness, and mutual respect was now hers. And she knew that with Daniel by her side, she was ready to face whatever the future held. As they stood there, hand in hand, under the soft glow of the park lights, Emma knew that she had found the one person who would always be there for her, the person who would help her build a future filled with love, laughter, and endless possibilities. It was the love story she had never thought she would have, but one that she was more than ready to embrace. And as the stars twinkled above them, Emma knew with all her heart that this was the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter filled with love, hope, and the promise of forever.